You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
At this point, he was actually, because he was so old, he was put into an old folks' home, and then they didn't allow me to have contact with him anymore. Interestingly enough, one evening we were sitting there, George, and my associate and I were talking to him because he's blind. There's no need for lights on, and we're sitting on a torn Naugahyde couch. He had his sitting off to the right of us. He was sitting in an armchair with his back to a multiple-pane old window. And it was nighttime, and the stars were out. And as I was sitting there talking to him about this lizard people, a light came down about maybe 700-800 feet away, and it split into two, to the left and the right, and the strobe started sequencing between the two light positions that had placed themselves there. And it was so remarkable because my friend and I were looking at this thinking this was almost like a Spielberg film. I mean, because the old pot stove was there, the blind Indian chief had his silhouette against the starlit sky and some sort of craft coming down. It was unbelievable, and I realized at that time that it was almost coming to the point of being magical and sacred of an experience, just that, witnessing it, and especially considering the topic of conversation. The actual location of where I suspect this of being, the location is actually connected through government maps showing there's a tunnel system leading out of this location along the Grand Canyon further south, and the tunnel that was planned on government documents actually intersects with San Francisco Mountain. And, you know, the Hopis believed that the Kachina dolls came from a tunnel underneath San Francisco Peak and flew into the air. Now I actually discovered this government map that shows that their planned tunnel system that they had for a hydroelectric power station there actually went southwards directly underneath the peak and ended up going west of Sedona to the Valle Verde area. And if you look at this location, you start wondering if there was already a massive tunnel system in this underground city that was discovered there and they just expanded upon it, or if some sort of a connection with a tube shuttle system they had between Page and also the Grand Canyon and then further south. So it was the whole experience up there talking to the Indians and finding these things out by doing other correlative research was enabled me to be able to have conversations which perhaps they realized that most other people wouldn't have just coming there to the reservation to sit down and talk to them.
Where did they go, John, these creatures? What happened to them? Are they all underground or did they leave?
Well, the reptilian humanoids once had open contact, it appears to be the case with surface humanity, and the last time they were here up in full form, there was a cloud canopy here that existed before the major collapse. This is where we get the whole flood story. And the cloud canopy was natural to our planet, and about 12,500 years ago there was a major shift, and some of them went underground and retreated back into their cavern systems that they had already established communities and cities and cultural locations in. And others, maybe even before that, had decided to actually leave the surface of the Earth for some prolonged explorative trip into outer space to some other system, but were scheduled to come back at the close of the Mayan calendar because they felt that was a significant thing. So, in other words, we will decide what the next world will be when the new calendar comes into being. It's a fresh start. And that's what I have shared with your audience before. I personally believe after the years of research with this and hearing these stories and immersing myself into the subject that when you look at what's going on over Mexico City right now, it definitely seems to be, saying that something is going to be happening. Their presence being allowed us to see them during the 1991 solar eclipse, and you have to wonder why they allowed us to see them at that point. They could have been away, but they knew people's eyes were cast skyward. They would know they'd have to be seen. So what was of importance that they were trying to show us that they would be seen at that time was the possibility that they are also observing the sun because they're trying to tell us in advance something is going to be happening. It's going to happen to do with particle physics and energy, and the crop circles are trying to relay the mathematics of the transformation down to a scale that's an atomic particle scale. I perceive that the air and the molecules that we're actually going to breathe are actually going to be changed and vibrating at a different rate. So everybody will be having an experience of sorts.
Are you familiar with the very long Kokomo, Indiana hum story?
No. Refresh.
All right. For years, there's been a hum driving people nuts in Kokomo, Indiana. And, you know, they've talked about it being industrial fans, just about everything. But some of the major newspapers, including ABC News, did a story on the unknown Kokomo hum.
Yeah,
I think there's
like
excavation. What's that?
Is that like the Taos hum?
Yeah,
like
same
in Taos,
thing.
New Mexico?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think it's excavation.
Yeah, it very well could be excavation. We could be hearing deep earth tunnel boring machines and their equipment running.
Yes.
We could be hearing extreme low-wave frequency propagation that, you know, the lower the frequency, it can penetrate Earth really well. And if you're trying to use even the shorelines of America as a diaphragm where you can send out a signal and have it just come off and hit the water, you might be able to communicate with submarines. But at the same time, you know, you have something going on underneath our feet that we're just not aware of. I have said that if it's that easy, if the tunneling technology was achievable back in 1972, like supposedly it was, there are commercial and military applications going on right now of the submarine technology. We have to make sure that we take a good part of our military spending and start protecting our borders, because as you're finding out along Mexico, there's a lot of tunnels leading in and out of Mexico to the United States. So we have to start guarding our borders underground, which means we need new technologies even to detect tunnel mooring machines at our borders. How are we to know that the Russians haven't already bored under Alaska and are sitting at our doorstep?
We really don't.
There's a large part of our military applications that the general public has never been brought to their attention.
John, do you travel much in terms of speaking engagements or other conferences?
Oh, I do. You know, I've met you at some of the
Yes.
conferences and such, and even been able to host an evening at one or two. It's I'm headed towards doing an appearance in Los Angeles. Let me go pull it up my computer because I do so many engagements at times. At the Whole Life Expo in April 25th.
Okay.
Or New Life Expo, and I'll be appearing there in a UFO panel with several people that your audience will all recognize.
Very good. Stay with us, John, because up next we'll open up the phone lines. We can chat with you about reptilians and then these underground cities. I'm George Norrie. Back in a moment. Your calls, John Rhodes on Coast to Coast AM.